From a mass shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis to a bomb threat against Jewish hospitals in New York, hate crimes are making headlines all across the country. FBI data shows that in just 1 year, 2022 to 2023, reported incidents rose by around 230. And with every act of hate comes deep grief, something today's guest knows all too well.
I know I cannot change that story. I cannot change what happened, but I can look forward and say, what difference can I make going forward? Every day we have that choice. Every day we have the choice to think about hate or think about the crime or think about kindness and think about helping others.
Mindy Corporon's life was shattered when a hate crime took both her 14-year-old son and her father. But instead of letting grief harden into anger, she's chosen another path, one rooted in kindness, compassion, and a mission to make the world a better place. On this episode of Grieving Out Loud, hear her advice for anyone suffering from grief and how we can all move forward in a world facing so much hate and division.
So many young people understand the value and the importance of kindness so that maybe their kindness, their ripple of kindness, could change someone else's actions.
Well, Mindy, I am so excited to have you as a guest on Grieving Out Loud. I absolutely despise it that tragedy has brought us together, but we were really introduced by a mutual friend who I have to thank for sending me your book, which, by the way, I cried through for the entire time I was reading. I was on a plane, and people around me are probably wondering what is wrong with that woman. But I was really touched by your story, and I was really excited to have you on because of the work that you've done following a horrible personal tragedy and the work you continue to do today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I am very happy to be on, and I am very thankful for our friend Marianne making the introduction, and it's wonderful to be with you today.
Yeah. Well, let's just start at the beginning, what brought you to this very day talking to me. And that was a horrible hate crime that occurred in 2014. And your son and your father were targets of this crime, but they weren't the real targets, right? They just were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Correct. Yes. And there were 3 people murdered at the same time. So we're linked to Terry Lamano, who was murdered right after they were murdered. Yes. So the intention of the shooter was to murder Jews. And he found himself on purpose, premeditated at the Jewish Community Center in Overland Park, Kansas. And my dad and son had literally just pulled up in my dad's vehicle, and the 2 of them were in the vehicle. And in the court case, the shooter said that he thought, he could get 2 Jews at once. And so he turned around and followed them back in and murdered my dad first and then turned the gun on my son, who lost his life about 30 minutes later.
As Mindy said, the shooter's target was the Jewish community, but her family isn't Jewish. Instead, her 14-year-old son was going to the Jewish Community Center that day to audition for a talent show.
It was the second session of auditions, and we had selected that date on purpose because all of our family members were in town. Yep, so it was something he'd been looking forward to for about 3 years.
Mindy's dad had offered to drive her son to the audition since she planned to be at her other son's lacrosse game. But when that game was unexpectedly canceled, Mindy decided to head to the Jewish Community Center herself, never imagining she was about to walk right into the unbelievable tragedy.
I was the first one on the scene from our family, and I arrived before the emergency vehicles, and I wanted to help my dad. I saw my dad lying in the parking lot, and I ran to him, and it was visually apparent that he had died on contact. It was not apparent to me like how it happened or why, but Yes, so he died on contact. And then we found out later that the shooter turned his gun on our son Reet at that time and shot him through the windshield.
At only 14 years old, Reet, Mindy's oldest son and a high school freshman, lost his life. The tragedy shook the family and the community.
He loved Boy Scouts. He loved debate. He loved singing and acting, and he loved theater. He was taking dance lessons, and he knew he was going to go to college, and he wanted to be a physician like his grandfather. So he was a really varied young man and so nice and so sweet. And the thousands of letters that we got after his murder just secured that, what we knew about him, and even more so. So many people, young people, wrote letters, and their parents wrote letters about their children and how much Reet meant to them. So that was very heartwarming. He evidently had a hug for everyone at school and evidently had a smile for everyone. Did he have faults? Of course he did. He was a typical teenager and did typical teenage things, but that gives you a well-rounded version of who he was.
Mindy's father, a longtime physician, closed his family practice soon after her second son was born. He moved to Kansas, choosing to spend his next chapter close to her and her children.
And he became certified in emergency care. So he was still working and employed as a family physician, but in the emergency care space. And so my dad loved family, or he and my mom would not have picked up their roots from Oklahoma and moved to Kansas to be near us. Now, I should say that my younger brother, who is 10 years younger than I am, also has 2 children. And so when they moved to our area, they had 4 grandchildren readily available. And they spent so much time with the grandkids. So my dad was still working at the time. He was still employed. But, on the weekends, what he did is go to everything that the kids were involved in. And at that time, Reet and our younger son, Lucas, were very active in, again, theater, baseball, football, scouting, etc. So he was in a place where he wanted to be. In fact, he raised his hand and said, I can take Reet to that audition, because I wasn't available to take Reet to the audition. So my dad had raised his hand to be there. Because frankly, if my dad had not done that, I would have been likely murdered with Reet at that time.
Right, exactly. And you hear about survivor's guilt. Did you ever feel like, I wish it would have been me, it should have been me? I mean, I think it would be understandable if you had.
I'm going to be really honest and say, I don't think I ever said or thought, I wish it were me, or it should have been me because of Lucas, our other son. But what I have said is, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to them. I've told them I'm sorry a million times for scheduling it on that day, scheduling it at that time, not getting there quick enough. I had that type of sorrow afterward, and I had a lot of counseling and thoughts and therapy to work through that process of being able to let that go and know that if the tables had been turned, I would want my dad, to continue living the best life he could live as well.
Right. And quite frankly, that's what Reet would want too,
yes.
right? For you to go
Absolutely.
on. And I think all of our children would want that for us. But what also, I think anybody who looks at this situation and what happened to you in 2014 is that it's just so senseless. These 2 amazing people taken in such a violent way for no reason, and there is no good reason ever, but to be targeted in this way wrongly, and there's just nothing that I can even say. I can't even put it into words, Mindy, when I'm trying to tell you what I think most people think when they hear this. Like, what a ridiculous, stupid thing to have happen, right?
Yes. My brother really coined it very quickly. He said it was an idiot with a gun. He was a white supremacist. He'd been a white supremacist for years. The U.S. government had known about him because he had been on trial and in jail for a period of time for his white supremacy actions that he had had previously. He'd run for office, I think, in the state of Arkansas, and then he relocated to Missouri. He'd been in the witness protection program, and he was not supposed to have firearms. So there are so many different layers to why this should not have happened, and to so many organizations who should have had an eye on him. The Southern Poverty Law Center, for one, had a huge file on him, and he still was able to get the firearms. And he got the firearm that he used to murder my dad and Reet from a retail store. And then he got the firearm that he used to murder Terry Lamanno from a gun show. And, frankly, Angela, I have not gone down that legal path. I thought about it, maybe in retirement I'll go down the legal path. But I just thought that it was the healthiest thing for me to focus on who they were when they were living, my dad and Reet, and focus on their kindness and help so many young people understand the value and the importance of kindness, so that maybe their kindness, their ripple of kindness, could change someone else's actions.
And you did that very well in your book, I thought. I thought you didn't focus on the person who committed this horrible crime, because really, we don't want to give him attention, right? We really don't want him to be notorious, because then people know who he is. And it's just better if you focus on the people that we've lost and what you can take from their lives to try to make the world a better place, rather than focusing on, because you can't go back and change it. You can't go back and rewrite the story as much as we wish that we could.
Right. And I am so in line with you on the pragmatism of that statement. My dad was very pragmatic as a physician, and I learned that from him. I have that in my DNA. And so many people will ask me, how did you move forward? How do you keep moving forward? How do you find joy? And you're exactly right. I know I cannot change that story. I cannot change what happened, but I can look forward and say, what difference can I make going forward? Every day we have that choice. Every day we have the choice to think about hate, or think about the crime, or think about kindness and think about helping others. And, some days it's harder than others, but I always feel so much lighter in my heart, and I feel better about myself. I feel closer to God, who I am faithful to, when I choose kindness and hope. And I do have hope. I have hope for mankind all the time.
Are you ready to protect the next generation from the dangers of substance use? Emily's Hope has created a comprehensive K-12 substance use prevention curriculum designed to educate, empower, and equip students with the tools they need to make healthy choices. Our age-appropriate lessons start in kindergarten and build through high school, using science, real stories, and interactive learning to help kids understand their bodies, brains, and risk of drug use. We're already reaching thousands of students across multiple states, and we're just getting started. Visit emilyshopeedu.org to learn more and share our curriculum with your school administrators and counselors. At Emily's Hope, we believe prevention begins with education. Let's work together to keep our kids safe. Yeah. Sometimes in today's world, it's hard to maintain that hope. It seems like we almost have whiplash from what's going on in the world. One bad thing after the other, oftentimes it seems. But I was thinking about that very thing this morning, that I want to be a beacon of light in the world. I want to provide people hope. The circumstances surrounding my daughter's death are very different than the circumstances surrounding your son's and your father's death. But there are still culpable people, and people that I could be very angry with. But it just does me no good, right? And so in the case of the shooter, he eventually received justice. I do want to cover that before we go on to talk about the way you have transformed other people's lives.
He did receive justice. I absolutely believe he has gotten that. So we didn't have much say-so in what legal process took place. It pretty much is out of your hands at that point when it happens in the way that it happened. Right. And the state of Kansas had the death penalty, and the district attorney used the death penalty in the case, or asked for the death penalty. And so the shooter was found and persecuted and then put on death row, and then he passed away. He died of natural causes. So here's the very interesting thing about hope and spirit and God is that he died the exact day that my book published. So Healing a Shattered Soul published on May 3rd of 2021, and he died in prison on May 3rd of 2021.
Wow. What are the chances, right? You have to take something away from that.
Right.
Yeah. Did he ever show any remorse?
No, none. The complete opposite. No remorse. And that was something that we had to release. And it was very, very difficult for our, then 12-year-old son between 12 and 14 during the trial, etc. Lucas, our son, wanted to speak directly with the shooter, and we spoke to the district attorney and assistant district attorney at the time, and they were so gracious. They scheduled time for Lucas, and Lucas went to the meeting with his phone in his hand, and he had all of his questions on his phone. And he sat down and asked his questions of the district attorney, and the DA said, "He is the most evil man that we have ever faced, Lucas." And he said, "I have a son your age, and I would not want my son to ever speak with this person in person." And he said, "So I understand how difficult it is, but, it is in your best interest that you not try to speak with him." And let me tell you, after the shooter was convicted and placed on death row, I think it'd been maybe 1 or 2 years, and Lucas reached out to the district attorney and asked, "Is it possible?" Now, I think what happened was when Lucas was of age, I think when Lucas turned 18 or 19, he reached out, and the district attorney was about to reach back out to him. Months would go by between their conversations, but I don't know that Lucas holds that or harbors that he didn't speak to him. I'm very thankful that he didn't, but he definitely was seeking some kind of remorse that I have always felt like we would never get. And we didn't. He died in prison.
Right. And how is Lucas doing today? Because we recently had a podcast that I'd been wanting to do for years and finally did with my own now adult children about losing a sibling, in a shocking, unexpected way. And, it's really shaped their lives in ways that I couldn't have imagined. And also, I think it's not all bad. It's hard to say that. Like it's made them deeper people that really kind of know what's important in life and what they value and what's important in friendships and with people. Although there's a lot of bad that goes with it, obviously, when you have a traumatic event when you're so young. But how is Lucas doing?
Thank you for asking. He is doing very, very well right now. He is gainfully employed in Dallas, Texas. He graduated from the University of Arkansas.
Oh, that's where my son is, too.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
So he graduated from the University of Arkansas, and he is employed in Dallas, and he is doing very well. I don't know how your children manage, but I can imagine. I do know that they had each other, and he didn't have another sibling. And I would say that has been and continues to be the most difficult aspect, is that he doesn't have another sibling to lean on. And there are some key friends of his and cousins who fill that gap for him. So yes, he's doing very, very well. Now, a significant part of our lives was leaving Kansas 4 years later. So the murders happened in 2014. We left Kansas in 2018 for Lucas. We left to help him survive and then thrive. And it worked. So it worked for our marriage. It worked for our family relationship, the three of us, and it worked for Lucas. And so we moved to Florida at that time, and he needed a restart. And also, he didn't heal the way I was healing. I was healing through the nonprofit that I know we're going to chat about. Mm-hmm. And I was healing through other ways, and he wanted to heal a different way. And so we needed to move so that he could heal his way. And luckily, we had the technology that I could immediately start working remotely in 2018. And so we lived in the same home, and we healed completely different ways.
That makes total sense to me because my family followed a similar trajectory. I didn't move. I live in the same community, but I was in the public eye, so everybody knew me. Everybody knew the story. Unfortunately, that also means they knew who my children were. They knew what happened. So they were sort of defined by this story. My kids were a little older than Lucas. So within a year to 2 years, they left the house, and they each went to separate cities. So they were able to restart their own lives there. which was very healing, I think, for both of them. And they weren't completely defined by their mom and their family and what happened in their family. So I completely understand what you're saying. It was just a little bit different scenario in my family because my kids were a little older than Lucas at the time.
Yes, it does sound very similar. And so I think both of us could recommend to other parents that in the same household, we all grieve differently. And it's so important to be aware of that. So I tell people that I became busy and worked. I was a workaholic. Lucas was more angry than anything. He was just an angry little bugger from 12 to 15. And then my husband drank more alcohol than he should have. And all of this has been public knowledge. So it's not anything new. And we needed to detach ourselves from that home and that space where everyone knew who we were. So we did. And we go back. I go back more than they do, but we all go back. And for a period of time, we can be there without being angry. We can be there and enjoying it. But I don't ever see myself living in Overland Park again or Kansas City, although I love it and I consider it very much a home community. And people have asked me before, and I said, when I'm there about 8 to 10 days at a time, I start getting angry. I start seeing too many memories and too many ways that we couldn't solve them, too many memories that really didn't happen. And so that just is a reminder of why we moved away. So I live the life in Florida and I'm loving it with my husband. Lucas is in Dallas and we see each other very often. And then all three of us get in and out of Kansas City as we need to.
Well, the ways you talked about coping with grief are very common. I mean, either turning to substances, turning to work, becoming extremely busy. That was me, by the way, still is really. And then, or becoming angry. And I think anybody who has experienced a traumatic loss or any kind of loss can relate to all three of those things because either that's been them or someone that they love. And so one thing that I think is really healthy in the way that you responded to grief, instead of being filled with hatred, which it would be easy to do when someone has done something so violating, you instead thought, I want to create a better, kinder world. So tell me about that.
I felt that immediately. And I'm not sure how to explain it other than that was my faith and that was God working through me immediately and angels working through me. Literally, the night that they were murdered, I heard that there was going to be a vigil. A student vigil is what was told to me. There's going to be a student vigil at the high school or a student vigil. And I wanted to attend the student vigil because when I was a sophomore in high school, my dear friend Kyle was killed in a car accident. And it devastated me. It really derailed me for more years than I realized. And all of a sudden, Angela, when Reed was taken, like that same evening, when I heard student vigil, all of a sudden my heart leaped out of my chest and said, you have to go talk to those students so that they don't get derailed like you did when Kyle was killed. And Kyle was killed in a car wreck. And so I went to that vigil just going to support students. And when I got there, for one, it wasn't at a high school. It was at an Episcopal church. And there's a whole story associated with the Episcopal church. So we get there and it is packed. There are people everywhere. And mind you, I did not understand. I had no comprehension of how large this had become. I was just at ground zero with them and finding them. And then again at ground zero, knowing that Reed lost his life at the hospital. And now all of these people here and TV crews, and I was overwhelmed. But I immediately felt the need to comfort his friends and students because of the experience I had had. So I would say that we create our onward. We create how we're going to go forward by what we may have experienced in the past or what we may not have experienced in the past, but we wish we would have. And then within several months, the idea of the nonprofit was actually brought about by several people who are Jewish and very close to me. So one Jewish man that I had worked with in wealth management called me and asked me to a meeting. And then other friends came, out and helped us eat and helped us at the house. And they sat down with us and talked about what might we want to do, etc.
Mindy went on to create 7 Days, an organization dedicated to overcoming hate by fostering kindness and understanding through education and dialogue. You can find a link to its website in this episode's show notes. A key part of the work is the Kindness Youth Leadership Team, which empowers young people to lead with compassion.
These students are mentored on philanthropy. They're mentored regarding being in the adult world. So we call it adulting. They learn how to adult in a quicker way. So they are in the ages of about 14 to 18 or 19. So they're freshmen through senior in high school. And again, we included the freshmen because Reet was a freshman in high school to senior in high school. They also learn how to speak about kindness and the importance of the ripples of kindness. We are educating them on how to become kindness influencers on social media. So they're on social media just almost 100% of the time. That's just how they communicate with one another and with their family members and with everyone. And so we have educational sessions on how they can focus and find and watch and see if hate is really being spewed. And rather than get sucked into it and maybe follow that path, how they can pause and stop and have a better conversation either with their friends or their family or even a mentor within the 7 Days organization about how to communicate on social media. So it's about focusing on our Kindness Youth Leadership Team and bringing them together. They come from all walks of life in the Kansas City metropolitan area. And I'm so happy to say that we've reached a goal. We had a goal for the end of 2026 to be in every single school district in the Kansas City metropolitan area. And we reached that this summer. So we reached it a whole year ahead of time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow. Congratulations. And I think in today's world where cruelty seems to be the MOA, cruelty seems to be everywhere. We need so much more kindness in the world. We need to remember to be kind to one another. And so I love it that you're promoting that out of such an unspeakable tragedy. And not only that, but you're also working with businesses now to teach them about grief and grief in the workplace?
Yes. So I created a company alongside Lisa Cooper. We co-founded Workplace Healing. And Workplace Healing is available for consultative services. And then we also created a software platform called the Human Recovery Platform. And that platform is for leaders, for managers, so that they get training on what to do when someone comes back to work who is a griever. So I don't know about you, Angela. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I find that so much of the material out and about, books, etc., what to do from the employee assistance program to the next book to read, they are what should the griever do? But there's very little effort placed on helping the person who's helping the griever, and specifically in the workplace. So just like I had to return to work, you had to return to work. And how did they handle you? What did they say? What was your, re-entry like? Did people speak to you? Did they not speak to you, etc.? And so we created Workplace Healing to offer an educational platform for employers so that they can keep their grieving employees during that path so that while the grieving employees are adjusting back to life.
Well, it's greatly needed in our society. For years on this podcast, I've been saying that we are just a grief-adverse society, right? We give people 3 days off, come back to work, and just act like nothing happened. And that has just sort of been the way it's been in our culture for decades, right? And I even remember it really struck me after I lost Emily. There were a couple other moms who had lost their children, their daughters, actually both to suicide. And both of them had been fired from their jobs within months of losing their daughters. Well, why is that? They didn't perform very well because they were shattered, right? And the employers were not understanding. I was lucky that I had an understanding employer and they treated me very well. And they gave me a platform to talk about this charity that I started and what I wanted to do. However, it was terrifying for me to go back to work and go back on television. I had had such anxiety and all that after my daughter died. So that was a hard thing for me to reacclimate to that, to being back in the public eye at the time. But I don't think that there's a lot of room for grieving people in the workplace.
Absolutely. And the statistics are that just like the two people that you mentioned that who unfortunately were let go, the statistics are that close to 60% of employees will leave their place of work on their own if they're not acknowledged because they can't have their story. You had the opportunity to have a platform and you made it a platform and they allowed you to have that platform. I didn't have that opportunity to meld the platform that I wanted to have with my wealth management firm. And I understand that. I just didn't have the ability to meld the two of them as much as I probably would have liked at the time. And I didn't know how to do it at the time. And so I started planning, how to leave. I started deciding when would I leave. And I knew within the first year, I knew that I might be able to stay about 2 or 3 more years and that would be it. Because I knew that I needed to be somewhere else. I knew I needed to have this platform. I just wasn't sure what it was. And it became 7 Days, the nonprofit, and it became Workplace Healing. That's what it became.
So you've completely transformed your life into something different. And me too. I mean, I think there's so many of us out there who've done that following a tragic loss.
As one of the nation's strongest financial organizations, First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card have the strength to do good. We support nearly 700 organizations and nonprofits. Our employees give more than 30,000 volunteer hours annually. And we are continually seeking ways to make South Dakota an even better place to live. It's the Premier way. First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card.
Alongside her efforts to make the world a better place through her organization, Mindy has also sought help for her own grief, turning to resources such as a spiritual healer for guidance.
I was looking at and thinking very seriously about leaving my wealth management career. I mean, it was my career. It was going to be my livelihood. It was our livelihood. I was the breadwinner of the family, and I felt like I needed to leave. And I said to her one day, I said, when I'm in the office, it's as if no one recognizes me. And she said, they don't recognize you. She said, you have been to hell and back. She said, and I wouldn't even say that you're back yet. I mean, this was early on. She said, you've been to hell. And for you to get out of that heat and to get out of that deep, deep, deep pain, you have to change who you are. You are different. She said, people who have specific levels of grief, it does change them. It changes who they are. And, I have become a different person. I think differently about things. I process differently. I spend my money differently. I give differently. I work differently, everything. And I'm in different spaces. So I even made a conscious decision 12 months ago to pause workplace healing for a period of time. Lisa Cooper wanted to step away. So I paused on workplace healing. And like you had said, when we were pre-talking about telling our story over and over and over, and everything that we do is based on our story, I felt like everything I did was based on my story. So workplace healing, 7 days, healing a shattered soul. So these 3 monumental efforts were all based on my story. So we paused workplace healing, and I took a completely different role, but with a nonprofit called Global Care Force out of Lenexa, Kansas. And it was a nonprofit, and it was very fun, and it was very interesting and very different. And it wasn't my story. But what they do is they help humanitarian efforts in places where people need healthcare. Okay, so completely different line of how to help people. But it was humanitarian, and it was a nonprofit. And there were really cool people that I worked with. But what's interesting is I enjoyed it, and I helped them. I did strategy and development for them. But what I also realized, Angela, is that my space is in empathy and grief and healing. That is where I am just in my zone. So I left that position, and I'm just back in the space of empathy, grief, and healing. I want to stay in this space because I think that's where I belong, but it doesn't have to always be about my own story. And so I'm ebbing and flowing. I do reinvent myself as needed to, continue being as healing and hopeful as possible.
I love that. And I think that's also good advice for people to give yourself permission to reinvent yourself. Give yourself permission to step away maybe from what you're doing if it's not serving you completely, and try something new and see where that leads. Because we are all on a different journey than we intended to be after loss, right? None of us intended this to be our stories. And when we get sucked so into that story day in, day out, it can almost be a trap in itself. And I love what you said about empathy and healing. And because I became a certified grief educator, so I lead a support group, and I love this podcast. I love talking to people like you, and I'm still using my journalism skills, so it's not all just about my story, although I often bring it up because I can relate to people because of what I've been through and because of what you've been through. But I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. And I hope that enlightens some people to look at it in that way. And if you'd like to learn more about our organization, Emily's Hope, we've put a link for you in the show notes. While you're there, we'd be grateful if you took a moment to rate and review this episode. And there are people that need to hear it. Won't you please share it with your friends and family? You'll also find links to other Grieving Out Loud episodes that you may find helpful. And you're a good writer as well, and I appreciate that. And you have another book coming out. Can you tell me you're working on it now?
Thank you. So I have submitted it to the publisher, and we're getting ready to start working on post-writing and pre-publishing. So they're getting ready to go through the editing process and figure out the packaging of it and everything. Yes. So this is not specifically focused on my story, although there are snippets and messages about my experiences to go along with it. But right now, the title looks like it'll be Leading Through Grief. I'm not sure if that will remain the title. It's fine if we talk about it being Leading Through Grief. It's for the employer. It's for the manager. It's for the coworker. It's for someone at work who is not grieving at the time, but really needs to know very quickly how to help someone that is grieving. And this is an excerpt from so much effort that we put into workplace healing over the years, all the research. And then what I also did is there's so much new research and, psychological safety is discussed and determinants of health is discussed. Diversity in the workplace is discussed. So there's so much that's in this book, and yet it's also going to be small. So it's going to be like it's a guidebook that I thought I want it to be something that an employer, like a boss, is handed this book as she is walking out of the office, and they know that someone needs it in the next couple of days, needs help. And she's going to be on a plane and she could read it in, 45 minutes to an hour. Or she could just look at one chapter and say, I just need the chapter on died by suicide. Or I just need the chapter on pet loss. And they can look at one chapter at a time. So while they could link together, they don't have to. So each chapter can be standalone, and it can be a really simple guidebook that is very current on what we look at in terms of grieving and our brain and our chemical imbalances with grief and cortisol, etc.
Wow. Well, it sounds like something that the world really needs. And I'm so glad that you've done that. And I'm so glad that I've gotten this chance to get to know you a little better, even though, these tragic circumstances brought us together. I always say I'm so grateful to know the people I meet along the way and the people that I feel in a way God puts in my path. And I think it's wonderful, the work that you're doing, and I hope you'll continue to do it.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you say you're happy to meet me. I feel the same way. And isn't it interesting who we've met because of the deaths and the circumstances that happened in our lives? I met President Barack Obama. We met President Obama because he was coming to Kansas City and we got an invitation, and he wrote us letters, and I'm sure the White House does that for so many different horrible tragedies, but he was coming to Kansas City and knew people who knew us, and our family met President Barack Obama. And then I had a seat at the Royals Stadium. I had a special seat at the Kansas City Chiefs, and all of these were recognition of the work that we were doing with 7 Days. And so as the founder, I got to sit in these special seats and meet special people. And each time, especially early on, I felt guilty that I was experiencing that because of what had happened. And now I look at them and I look at other people who are going through that, and I just encourage them and say, you know what, you didn't write that story. That isn't the story that you wanted, but it is what it is, and keep looking forward and have as much hope as you can for the future.
Well, on those wise words, we'll wrap up the podcast, but I hope to have you back when the book comes out.
Great. Thank you. I'd love to.
And thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to Grieving Out Loud. We hope today's episode offered comfort and insight. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wanenberg King and Kaylee Fitz. Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org.